That's Enough Out of You podcast is sponsored by Todd John's Law. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people, whether it's the result of an auto accident caused by the carelessness of another driver or being charged with a crime. Dealing with the aftermath of a personal injury accident or being involved with the criminal justice system can be extremely difficult. That's why, whatever you're facing, you should never go it alone. You need an experienced attorney who will stand by you every step of the way. Todd is experienced, licensed, trusted, respected, and guaranteed. No one will work harder or more diligently on your behalf, and he will personally handle your case from beginning to end. Located on Drinker Street in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, Todd has been representing the legal rights of Scranton and Wilkes-Barre personal injury victims and those accused of a crime for over 20 years. At Todd John's Law, the utmost priority is ensuring that your rights are always protected and that your case is resolved as quickly and fairly as possible so that you can move on with your life. Call Todd John's Law at 570-876-6903. With Todd John's Law, you will receive equal justice under the law. Hey there, and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on?
Billy Rader, the main host. How you doing, buddy?
I've been better.
Yeah? You under the weather again, buddy?
Just
Stress getting you?
Corporate America sucks, Sean. You know that.
Oh, we know that, buddy. You don't have to tell me that.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that, buddy. It's the worst.
Yep.
What are you gonna do? You know?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. You don't have to complain to me, buddy. I know all about it.
So
I hear you though, buddy. I hear you. I feel your pain, buddy.
You work hard and for what?
The working man's the backbone of American society, buddy. And the working man's been getting screwed since the beginning of time.
Yep.
You know, from the Rockefellers all the way down, they stomp all over the working man, buddy. And that's you know, it's a shame, but that's the way it's always been, and I don't know when it's going to change, buddy.
I don't know. But anyway, what are you gonna do? You gotta. They call the tune. You gotta dance to it. So anyway, all right. Enough of that. What else we got, Sean? What else we got going on? Hey, you know what I've been listening to a lot lately is if you're a wrestling fan, the Jim Cornette Experience. Jim Cornette has two podcasts. I don't know. You remember Jim Cornette, right, Sean? He was a manager. He was a wrestling manager back in the day, and then he actually started his own territory, his own wrestling company in the early 90s. And then he moved from that to WWF. He was what they call a booker, I guess, with WWF. And anyway, there's not too many guys that know as much about wrestling as he does. But he's got two podcasts. He's got one's called the Jim Cornette Experience, and the other one is called the Jim Cornette Drive-Thru, which is based on a pretty funny story with him at a drive-thru. I don't know if you ever heard that one, Sean.
No, I did it, but Jim Cornette was always a character.
He's funny. I'll tell you what, he's a riot. So if you're ever in the mood to hear him talk about old time wrestling and talk about the 80s and 90s, it's a good podcast to listen to. But anyway. So, all right, Sean, what do we got going on today?
All right, Billy. So tonight, the episode, title of the episode is Power to the People. And we're going to be talking about Freddie Hampton. And this is going to be a powerful episode, Billy. And it ties into a lot of the things we talked about, and it's going to tie into what, Rick Otto says, the war on the left in the 60s, the assassinations of the leaders in the 60s, The civil rights movement, obviously, Vietnam. I mean, it's all part of it, Billy.
Right.
And the one thing before we even get started, I wanted to make it clear that too many times in this country, we go to the extreme view on everything. And, when we're going to be talking about operation, we talked about a lot, CointelPro, and we're going to be dealing with specific FBI agents and specific policemen who were involved in the police intelligence units that, was handpicked by Edgar Hoover, these FBI agents. So we're not going to condemn the entire FBI as a whole or police departments as a whole, because too many times, Billy, you know this. It's like, pick a side. All cops are good. All cops are bad. And the answer is always in the middle, Billy.
Yeah,
and
of course. Just
and the
like
thing is, like anything, Billy, and there's the FBI agents, the FBI profilers, the people that work the organized crime. I mean, terrorism, they do a great job. And Hoover was specific, with CointelPro, he recruited specific agents for this assignment, and that's who we're talking about tonight. And through their relationship with the police department intelligence units, they had specific people picked out for these operations. So that's what I want to make it clear. But this whole thing, Billy, it ties into everything we talked about: the Civil War of the 60s, the attack on the left wing, Operation Chaos, the whole thing with Manson, like I said, was the final blow against the left. The assassinations of the 60s, you had JFK, RFK, Malcolm, and then Martin Luther King. And then we're going to talk about the fifth one, which is Freddie Hampton.
Right.
And, then you look at the internationally, the assassinations of Dag Hammarskjöld, Patrice Lumumba, R. Benz in Guatemala. I mean, all these tie in together, Billy, and it's just, it's little parts of a big picture. And then, it ties into the Vietnam, at this point, Vietnam is raging, the war is raging, the anti-war movement is strong. The country's being torn apart by Vietnam. And, Hoover goes into CointelPro. He, we talked about it before, Billy. It was an illegal counterintelligence program designed against American citizens. And it was specifically aimed at, the civil rights movement. And Hoover was afraid of, the Black nationalist movement. And, he said specifically that their leaders need to be neutralized. And those words are very dangerous, Bill. Words have consequences. And those words specifically, the leaders have to be neutralized, is very powerful wording. So let's get into it, buddy. So okay. December 4th, 1969, there's a shootout, apparently was what the media called this, a shootout. And the Illinois party chairman of the Black Panthers, Freddie Hampton, 22 years old, is killed. Okay, Bill? Now, we're going to get into the specifics of this, what the media called a shootout, but it was really an assassination, Bill, because you had 99 shots from the police to the Panthers, and you had one shot going the other way from a Black Panther, and it was a reflex, Billy, from a Panther that was sitting in a chair with a gun, and when he got hit with a bullet, the reflex, his gun went off and the bullet went into the ground. So it wasn't aimed at anybody. It was a reflex shot. So how can you call that a shootout when you have 99 shots going one way and then one, accidental shot going the other way? How's that a shootout? Well, let's start, 1969. So you had the assassinations of the 60s. You have the war against the left. Really, the left is on the leadership is pretty much decapitated. The left is on the run. They're really getting hammered. The Vietnam War is raging. The anti-war movement is ramped up. And you have heavy poverty in the Black community, and many young Black activists, that were frustrated that there was no changes. So after the police killing of unarmed Black teenager in San Francisco, two activists in the Bay Area, specifically Oakland, Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, they founded the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. That's what it was called originally, Billy. And Newton knew that it was legal to carry arms in California as long as it's not concealed, because he studied the law. So what happens is the Black Panther enrollment increases across the country, and they begin to patrol the communities, Billy. Okay, their communities. And J. Edgar Hoover puts in the FBI CointelPro program that was already targeting the civil rights movement, okay, and targeted Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Now, their main target now, 1969, is the Black Panthers. And Hoover is absolutely frightened of the Black Panthers, and he has designs to take them out completely. And there's many confrontations between the Panthers and police all across the country. And CointelPro assets in the media, the FBI, just like the CIA, uses assets in the media, and they made sure the coverage was all one-sided. This is why you could report a shootout when you have 99 shots going one way and one harmless shot, accidental shot going the other way.
Well, the Black Panthers have always been portrayed as like a militant group, right? I mean, the media has always portrayed them that way.
Right.
Like a resistance group or a group that was going to start.
Well, they were a revolutionary group. There's no doubt about that. But
right.
The way, you're right, the way the media portrayed them, and this has to do with Hoover using his CointelPro assets, to make sure that the coverage was one-sided, and the Panthers got all negative press.
Right.
And this is the way everything was reported. So CointelPro from Hoover puts out the narrative, that the Panthers' goal is to kill all white people.
Right.
And this is what Hoover's trying to instigate, and remember, Billy, let me talk. The Panthers did call for radical change, Bill, and revolution to overthrow what they call the capitalist enterprise. And they focused on socialism to solve economic problems. And they wanted a democratic socialist country in the United States like there was in Canada at the time, Billy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me get into, do you remember, Bill, in the Manson episode, I talked about that memo. That J. Edgar Hoover put out. And it's important that we go and look back at that now. This was in 1967 that he put out the memo. But it's what he said was that the importance of preventing the militant Black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability, they must be discredited to the white community, both the responsible community and to the liberals who have the sympathy of the militant Black nationalists simply because they are Negroes. That's Hoover's exact words. Okay. Wow. And yeah. And then he goes on to say in a later memo, the Peace and Freedom Party has been furnishing the Black Panther Party with financial assistance. Now, this is Hoover, Bill. Anonymous letter is now being prepared by the Bureau for approval to be sent to the leader of the Peace and Freedom Party, in which it is set forth that the Black Panther Party has made statements in closed meetings that when the armed rebellion comes, the whites in the Peace and Freedom Party will be lined up against the wall and slaughtered just like the rest of the whites. Now, that's Hoover with his disinformation, Bill.
Right. But a lot of people believe that.
Sure, because he's out there in the media, he's out there putting this out on the streets, and he's sending out this disinformation. And CointelPro, they started targeting the Panthers, and one of the worst things that they did, Bill, the framing of a Black Panther, Gerard Geronimo Pratt, who was, a decorated Vietnam vet. Okay. And he would be in prison for 27 years for a murder that the FBI knew he did not commit, Billy, because he was in Oakland at the time of the crime, 400 miles away, and the FBI had him wiretapped, so they knew where he was, and they knew he couldn't have committed this murder, but he sat in jail for 27 years. And this is the kind of damage that CointelPro did. But getting back to the Panthers, they start forming chapters all over the country, and they start implementing social programs like food and clothing drives, free health clinics, disease testing. These were all volunteer and business donations, including.
This sounds very dangerous, Sean. Very dangerous.
Well, to a guy like Hoover, sure, Billy. But it's unbelievable that this is what he's focused on instead of like the Mafia.
Right.
But, this included the Free Breakfast for Children initiative, which Hoover actually thought was a dangerous program, Billy.
Awful. How could you possibly give a child a free breakfast?
He said the program was actually designed to get rid of white people.
Well, I could see that. I mean, you're gonna feed all these black kids. The white kids are gonna starve.
We're gonna talk about Hampton, how he brought in. It wasn't just black kids, Billy, and this is why Hampton became such a threat, and I think even more of a threat. And this might be kind of a controversial statement, but in Hoover's mind, I think Hampton was more of a threat than even Malcolm and Martin Luther King.
Right.
But because Hampton was so dynamic, Bill. I don't know if you heard him speak, but I mean, he's just for 22 years old, a kid.
Yeah. He was so young. Yeah, people don't realize that.
They don't realize it. And the quotes he had, like power to the people, and you could kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution.
Yeah.
And just, such a dynamic speaker. And he started, the president of the local NAACP council at 19 years old, Billy. Teenager, Bill.
Amazing.
In 1967.
Yeah.
And then he's recruited by the founder of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. At age 21, he's leading and building the Black Panthers stronger. Okay. And it's important now to talk about Chicago at the time, Bill, because that was one of the most segregated cities in the North.
Mm-hmm. And
Mayor Richard Daley, he opposed neighborhood integration. And he starts to push, he starts to redevelop neighborhoods, push in poor residents into public housing. So in the south side of Chicago, you had a lot of poor black families, but you also had a lot of poor white families, Bill. Okay. And then like the Lincoln Park section would be poor Puerto Rican neighborhoods. And these were the kids that were being drafted into Vietnam. And this is where, the whole Vietnam thing ties into it, because these neighborhoods are being oppressed, and these are the kids. It's not the rich people's kids that's going to Vietnam. It's the poor people's kids.
Right, of course.
And this is, where Rick Gatto talks about the civil wars going on here. And then you have this other war in Vietnam that nobody understands why we're even there.
Right.
And it's these poor kids that are going over there and getting drafted. So Hampton forms the coalition of activists working across all racial lines, Billy. And this was based on class against the corrupt government system in his eyes. And it was called the Rainbow Coalition. And this was absolutely frightening to J. Edgar Hoover, because, this would include the Black Panthers. It would include a group called the Young Lords, which is a Puerto Rican independence group. And it would also include the Young Patriots, which is basically poor white kids, Bill, that were from the South. They moved up to the North. And the Panthers started to help the Young Lords and the Young Patriots to launch their own social programs. So they were doing the same things, the drives, the food drives and the free clinics and everything else, the Hoover thinks is so dangerous.
Right.
And they start to do that in their neighborhoods. So now Rainbow Coalition chapters are forming all over the country. And Hoover and the FBI are flipping out. And I'm talking specifically the CointelPro section of the FBI. And Hampton becomes a national security threat in Hoover's eyes at this point. And we've seen this play before, Billy.
Sure.
We've seen it before. And we know how it's going to play out. In 1968, Hoover puts out another memo. And words have consequences, Billy. People forget that. But he puts this out and he says, to prevent the rise of coalition groups and the rise of a Black Messiah. And this is the goal of CointelPro. We need to prevent the rise of a black messiah.
Unbelievable.
And Hampton's not named specifically at this point, Billy, but he
Right.
fits the profile to a T. Okay. And here's what I talked about earlier, Bill. The memo claims that the real goal of the children's breakfast program was to promote white hate. I mean, just explain Hoover to me, Bill. How does he come to these conclusions? Like, here's a guy who says that the mafia doesn't exist,
right?
And these are the programs he's targeting, like free breakfast programs to poor kids. Are you kidding me? Like, I don't understand this guy. And they have his name on a building.
Right. I know. It's ridiculous.
But, he starts to see the Black Panthers are the number one threat to the internal security of the United States in Hoover's eyes. Okay. At the same time, he claims the mafia doesn't exist.
Right.
So CointelPro starts to work with, Mayor Daley and the Chicago Police Intelligence Unit. Now, remember, Bill, the specific police officers that are involved with specific FBI agents. And these are all people that, basically handpicked by Hoover and his key guys in the program, like his assistant director, William Sullivan, who we talked about on the show before.
Mm-hmm.
And, in 1968, Bill, wait to hear this. So Fred Hampton gets arrested for robbing an ice cream truck, okay, and handing out $78 of ice cream to poor kids. Okay, and this is the national security threat, right, in Hoover's eyes.
Yeah.
And he's sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison. And of course, it's appealed and he's released on bond, but he would lose the appeal and would have to go back to prison by December 6th. But of course, he never made it.
The damage was already done. I mean, those kids got ice cream.
They got ice cream. I know. It's just unbelievable. So at this point, this is what Hoover and CointelPro, this is what makes them so dangerous, Bill. So leading up to the raid, he has his people, William Sullivan is running a lot of the counterintelligence programs for Hoover and the CointelPro, a lot of these operations. And he has his people starting to turn provocateurs and flipping people to become informants against the Panthers. And one of the guys they're able to turn is a guy by the name of William O'Neill. Okay. Mm-hmm. And William O'Neill, was picked up on charges by law enforcement, and the FBI steps in and they flip him. And he starts to work inside CointelPro against the Panthers, specifically Freddie Hampton, and he becomes Hampton's bodyguard. Okay. And the directive from his handlers, is for him to instigate violence, and one of the things they were worried about, Bill, was Freddie Hampton was organizing gang members to stop the violence. Okay. Right. Which you think would be a good thing, but not according to Edgar Hoover, and he sees this as Freddie Hampton uniting the gangs is dangerous, but Freddie Hampton is trying to keep the violence out of the equation. Okay, so what he has O'Neill do is instigate a split between a specific gang, the Black Street Rangers, okay, and break up all this gang involvement with Freddie Hampton. And FBI, they start to release, Bill, the racist cartoons in the name of the Panthers. They start, just think about, the whole thing with Charles Manson, where, that slaughter, they try to blame the Panthers on, right, originally. So, the press, like you talked before, the media is really bad. And O'Neill is on a directive to bring down Freddie Hampton. And he's sitting right next to him as his bodyguard. And he's instigating a lot of problems, and he's working for the FBI. And he would later say, that he has no allegiance to the Panthers. His allegiance was to the FBI. And in the end, Bill, when you see what happens, O'Neill would end up committing suicide in 1990 because he couldn't deal with his betrayal and what he did and what happened with Freddie Hampton.
Yeah. We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Residence Inn by Marriott in Scranton. Discover comfort and convenience in Scranton. If you're planning a short or extended stay in the Scranton, Pennsylvania area, Residence Inn by Marriott, located at 947 Viewmont Drive, will ensure your stay is nothing short of exceptional. Their friendly team is committed to providing you with top-notch service and a memorable experience. Whether you're in town for business, leisure, or a bit of both, Residence Inn Scranton has you covered. They offer free Wi-Fi, an indoor pool, meeting and event space, complimentary hot breakfast, a fitness center, and an on-site market. And Residence Inn Scranton is pet-friendly. Your home away from home. Residence Inn Scranton features spacious studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom suites, and all are complete with a fully equipped kitchen. There's a cozy fireplace lounge and an outdoor barbecue area. Call 570-343-5121 or go to Marriott.com for more information. Residence Inn Scranton, where hospitality meets home. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Fairfield Inn by Marriott. Located at 949 Viewmont Drive in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Fairfield Inn Scranton exemplifies travel made easy. They offer stylish guest rooms with plush bedding, complimentary hot breakfast with healthy options, one of the area's premier hotel fitness centers, as well as nearby dining options. While you're staying at Fairfield Scranton, make sure you check out some local attractions like the Scranton Cultural Center, the Electric City Trolley Museum, Montage Mountain Resorts, and the Steamtown National Historic Site. Catch a Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins game or a concert at the Mohegan Sun Arena, or take the historic Lackawanna Coal Mine tour. Fairfield Inn Scranton is in the center of it all. Experience comfort and convenience in Scranton at the Fairfield Inn by Marriott. Call 570-343-5121 or go to Marriott.com for more information. Fairfield Inn Scranton, where hospitality meets home.
Leading up to the raid, we have important figures to talk about. So CointelPro is leading a lot of this and helping the Chicago police form this raid against the Panthers. And specifically, the guy leading the raid on the Chicago police and the police department intelligence is Sergeant Groth. And we talked about him with Professor Blow. He was the guy, Groth was the guy that was in charge, Bill, of investigating the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in Chicago. Remember, Oswald was a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans.
Right, yeah.
And Professor Blow said when he talked about the Chicago plot against JFK, that if that patsy and that plot, if that plot went through and Thomas Arthur Valet would have been the patsy, Professor said he wouldn't be surprised if some memo or some flyers of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee ended up in Valet's apartment, linking him to the communists. Because here's the guy Groth is the police department intelligence. He's running the operation against the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Okay, so the other guy that was involved was a guy by the name of Edward Hanrahan from the state's attorney's office. Okay, and they're directing this raid against the Panthers. And what happens is O'Neill gives a layout of Freddie Hampton's apartment, okay, to his handlers that they end up giving it to the Chicago police for this raid. So what happens is 14 Chicago police officers arrive at Hampton's house. Inside, you had Hampton with his pregnant girlfriend, okay, and several Panthers are inside. The officers go inside, and the shooting starts. Now, some of the people were asleep, including Hampton, and the shootout goes. The 99 shots go off, Bill. All these shots, and then what happens is the police enter the apartment and they force Hampton is asleep on his bed, and he's in a deep sleep through this whole thing, Billy. Okay, and what they did, the officers force his girl into the kitchen, and she hears them say something to the effect that he's barely alive, but he might make it. And then she hears gunshots. Okay, and then she hears them say he's as good as dead now. So this was an execution, Billy.
Right.
And the thing is, there's a lot of information now, and a lot of people think that evidence points towards O'Neill drugged Freddie Hampton before this raid, and this is why he was in such a deep sleep. And the autopsy could never conclusively show that, but they did show that he had large amounts of fentanyl in his system, Billy. Okay, and if O'Neill drugged him, it does make sense. This is why he didn't wake up through this whole thing. He was asleep through this whole shootout. I mean, I don't care what kind of deep sleep you're in, Billy. You hear 99 shots going off, it kind of wakes you up, no?
You would think so, yeah.
So it ends up, Freddie Hampton's dead. There was another Panther was killed, 7 injured, and the media calls this a shootout. CointelPro, sets their media assets in action. And, it was a lot of this was from William O'Neill. The information he gave the floor plan to the FBI, who gave it to the Chicago police. And, this led to what has to be considered the 5th assassination, Billy. Okay. And there was prior investigations into this. There were investigations. There was a civil trial, Billy. Okay. In 1982. And it ended up that the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the federal government had to pay the equivalent of $1.87 million to each of the 9 plaintiffs. Okay. And at the trial, Rob Zimmers of the FBI, he testified at the trial that only the one shot came from the Panthers, and it was a reflex shot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he was their ballistics expert, Billy. And this is their own expert testifying to this.
And it was a shotgun that was dropped, right? I mean, it wasn't even actually fired by somebody.
No, it wasn't. Well, it was Mark Clark was sitting in a chair, Billy. And when he was hit with the bullets, the reflex of that, he dropped the gun, but it went off. But it went off. The bullet went into the ground, Billy. It wasn't aimed at any of the police.
Right.
So, the police sergeant Grout, or however you say that, he claims that, they went in and the Panthers started firing, is what he said.
Right.
And they fired back. Well, that's not true, Billy.
Yeah.
That's not true. And then there was another investigation by the NAACP commission, okay? And they named their report Search and Destroy. And if that sounds familiar, Billy, that's because that was specifically named because that's the name given to the military missions in Vietnam that were out to kill the Viet Cong. Okay. And the NAACP commission report came to 4 conclusions. And here's their conclusions about this raid. The first one was that the police fired all but the one shot. Okay, that's confirmed. And that was from Zimmers, who was he's specifically the FBI firearms identification expert. So this is their own expert, Billy, saying this. The second conclusion was that one of the officers, Officer Jones, most likely fired the first shot in the hallway next to the front door. So that goes against everything Sergeant Groth said, that the Panthers fired the first shot. Okay. And this was based on the shotgun impact hole and the shotgun wads found outside and to the left of the living room, which matched Jones's shotgun. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is what they came to. And, they said the second shot was by Sergeant Groth through the front door. And then the third shot was from the Black Panther, Mark Clark, who, when he got hit, the reflex went off, Billy. The shot went off into the ground. Okay. And here's what they concluded about Mark Clark, Bill, that quite possibly after he's been mortally wounded, that this happened. So he was killed, Billy, and then the shot went off, the reflex went off.
Right.
Now, the third conclusion is the most dramatic of other conclusions. The shots in Freddie Hampton's head, they're closest to each other, and the proximity to the shoulder wound indicate that they were fired from persons who could see their target, meaning they were inside the room, Billy.
Right.
So this big shootout that was going on, they were from fire from the outside and stuff. This is when they actually entered the room. Okay. And it's therefore probable either that Freddie Hampton was shot after the occupants were removed from the room by the officers, which is what his girlfriend said. She was removed from the room, and that Hampton was lying on the bed and deliberately selected as a sole target. The death of Freddie Hampton appears to the commission to have been isolated from the killing of Mark Clark and the wounding of the other Panthers, Bill. And I should name them, Billy: Brenda Harris, Ronald Satchel, Verlina Brewer, and Blair Anderson were all injured in this shootout here, if you want to call it a shootout. It's this assassination attempt.
Assassination, yeah. It was a
Well, you will see what the commission called it, but
right.
The commission concluded there's probable cause to believe that Fred Hampton was murdered, and he was shot by an officer or officers who could see his body lying on the bed. So they were in the room with him when they shot him, Billy, at point blank range. That's the findings of the commission. So that's powerful stuff. And the fourth finding was that the commission has actually been unable to determine whether Hampton was drugged at the time of his murder. Okay, but it considers it more probable that he was. They did analysis on it, pathologist reports, and the thing is, they couldn't conclusively determine that he was drugged, but there was large amounts of fentanyl in his system, Billy. But they finally, at the end, they called this, they gave it a term, Billy. They didn't say it was a murder. They didn't say it was assassination. They called the death of Freddie Hampton a summary execution. And that's pretty powerful words. That's pretty powerful words. So,
well, I'm looking at this. They said it looks like they ruled it to be justifiable homicides. Also, the blue ribbon panel.
That's a different panel, Bill.
There's
different. So many. Well, this is why, Bill. This is why originally, with Chicago police, there was an internal investigation, and they said it was justifiable at first.
Right.
Okay. That's what you're referring to.
Okay.
But when you look at the evidence, Bill, you look at the evidence. There's no way you could come to that conclusion that this is justifiable, Bill.
Right. Well,
I mean,
I don't know if you've seen this picture, Sean. There's a picture of the police carrying his body out of the building.
The one guy's laughing.
They're all smiling. So
two of them are. One guy, I don't know if he would say he's smiling, but one guy's laughing. He's more than just smiling.
Right. So I mean, if that's them after a shootout, that's something else.
Yeah. And Bill, what happens here is that, this leads to a lot of violence across the country. Okay. Because what happens next is the Weathermen, okay, which was a radical faction of the Student for Democratic Society. And you're familiar with the Weathermen, Bill. You don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows.
Right. Yep.
Well, in 1970, they become the Weather Underground, okay? And they took credit for bombings of U.S. buildings. And a lot of it was for retaliation for Vietnam, but a lot of it was for police violence against Black citizens. And, specifically after Freddie Hampton, the Weather Underground committed a lot of violence, Billy, which, retaliated. They bombed the National Guard building in Washington, D.C. And a lot of this violence just breaks out. And then you have, the Kent State incident, Billy, where you had members of the National Guard. They fired 61 shots.
Right.
Into a demonstration of like 200 Kent State students, 4 end up dead, 9 wounded, and 1 paralyzed for life. And then shortly after that, you have the Jackson State incident, Billy. 10 days after Kent State, 2 more students are killed when state troopers opened fire on an unarmed group of Black students against Jackson State. So all this violence, it all ties in together, Billy. And it all, to me, is a reflection of CointelPro and what a disastrous, dangerous, illegal operation this was against American citizens, specifically the civil rights movement. And all the damage that was done, Billy, all the damage. And you think about the programs, Billy, that a lot of these programs, you see today, Billy, that the Panthers started the free breakfast in the clinics. You see them in every major city, and I think we should talk, COINTELPRO, Bill. A lot of the stuff has been released. And the only reason we even know about that, and I mentioned this before, Bill, is because this group of anti-war protesters broke into the FBI building in Media, Pennsylvania, and they stole a bunch of files.
Right.
And in these files contained COINTELPRO. And then they start releasing this information to different outlets. And this is how we know about it, or who knows, maybe we never would have knew about COINTELPRO.
Yeah.
But to me, they provoke violence. They fake violence and false flag operations. And ultimately, they ended up destroying the Panthers, Bill, because by 1982, the Panthers were done. And one of the good films on this, Bill, is I know you've seen it, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Great movie.
A great movie. And the thing is, the actor who plays Freddie Hampton is really good. He's really good. But I think it's a big ask to ask anybody to try to replicate Freddie Hampton.
Yeah.
I mean, he was so dynamic as a speaker, and that's a tall ask for anybody. But the actor did a good job.
I think he won an Academy Award, right?
I don't know. Did he?
I think so.
He was very good. He was very good. I'm not saying he wasn't. He was very good, but I just don't think anybody could really replicate how dynamic he was. And but he's very good in the film, and the film is really good, and it shows William O'Neill. It shows about what he did, and ultimately he ends up committing suicide, Billy, in 1990.
Yeah,
he couldn't deal with his betrayal, and what he ultimately did to Freddie Hampton, and this whole thing, Bill. But again, it's created by COINTELPRO. They're the ones that get William O'Neill, and this is how they design and destroy these groups. And I got to say, Bill, even if COINTELPRO was designed to take out the Mafia, I would still sit here and say that's not the way to do it. That's an illegal operation. That's not the way to take out the Mafia.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing is they still have to go through the system, but you can't wiretap people, without a court order, Billy. You're instigating, you're putting these in to instigate violence. You're turning people, and then you're trying to, you're setting up all these false flag operations, inciting all this violence.
Right.
And even if it was used against the Mafia, I would sit here and say that's wrong.
And I think we had an argument a while ago comparing it to
we
Rico.
did.
But and I see you're like, I've kind of changed my opinion on this, because Rico was
became the law.
Right. And it also, they still had to follow the letter of law. They still, the cops and FBI, they still had to obtain search warrants and wiretap, warrants for wiretaps. So they couldn't just do that on their own. They needed probable cause. They needed to obtain those things legally.
The whole thing with Rico, the reason that they needed it really, though, is to
get to the bosses.
Because they were so insulated from the people that were actually doing the crimes.
Right, exactly.
And if they could show the whole thing as a criminal enterprise, and they could connect the bosses to the people indirectly below them that were committing these crimes, then they could all be under one umbrella.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so far, like COINTELPRO is a counterintelligence operation, Bill, similar to what the CIA does against groups internationally. But this was done by the FBI against the citizens. And the thing is, Bill, William Sullivan was really close with James Angleton of the CIA. And you could see a lot of Angleton design in COINTELPRO. So they took a lot of what the CIA was doing, and the CIA had their own COINTELPRO called Operation Chaos that we talked about with Manson.
Mm-hmm.
But they took a lot of this from the CIA and what the CIA uses in a lot of these black operations. And they used this was a black operation against American citizens, Billy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it basically was the same type of black op that they used to get bin Laden.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd say it was similar to that, Billy. I mean, they did some they tracked Bin Laden, but then they sent in the SEALs, Billy.
Right,
I
but
mean,
it was still a
just a
CIA.
little.
It was still a CIA operation, though.
Well, sure it was. Sure it was. But this was more of, I don't know if they used those tactics against Al Qaeda. I mean, this was a way to destroy the organization from the inside, the
Right.
Black Panthers. And this
Right.
is
No, that's what I'm saying is the way that they killed, Freddie Hampton.
Well,
They're
okay, if
very
you want to,
similar
yeah,
to-
sure. It was an assassination. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And it's just, it's just
I'm
unbelievable.
not comparing Al Qaeda to.
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but it's just that the media, the assets in the media for all these years, that the FBI was using, the CIA, we know they use them, and they just spin this story, Bill. And the Panthers were so much negative light was put on them, and this whole thing, the shootout against the Panthers that ended up, Freddie Hampton was killed. It's just not the way it was, Billy. And it's
Right.
just,
I mean, what happened to due process? DK's Corner, located on 802 East Lackawanna Avenue in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. Visit DK's Corner for hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, and delicious breakfast, including breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos. And take it from me, the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. Check out DK's Corner, Oliphant's little hoagie shop. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. That's DK's Corner in Oliphant, Pennsylvania.
This has to be considered the fifth assassination.
Sure.
We talk about the 4 assassinations. This was the 5th. And then, you had everything that happened after that, Bill, because this was 1969, the end of 1969. And then, in the 70s, you have all the, we talk about the weather on the ground and the anti-war movement and,
right.
Vietnam just raging on. And then you get into Watergate and it's just, everything was downhill, Bill, because the leadership of the left wing of the Democratic Party was decapitated in the 60s.
And scared to death.
It's all part of one thing, Bill. Everything we talk about on these podcasts, if you listen to us from day one, you could pretty much put together everything into one big picture. And it all comes back to people like, Alan Dulles, James Angleton, Edgar Hoover. These guys, their definition in national security and national security threats is just way out of line and way different than what me and you would consider national security threats.
Right.
Because, I mean, a guy giving free ice cream to kids, Billy, that's not a national security threat.
Yeah. I mean, giving free breakfast to kids. I mean, by that definition, my school gives free breakfast to kids.
A lot of these programs, Billy, that you see today, they were started by the Panthers, Bill.
Right.
And the things Freddie Hampton was doing with gangs, Billy, he was trying to stop the violence and bring them into the fold to do the things that he was doing in the community. And Hoover saw that as a threat. We can't, in his mind, we can't let Freddie Hampton align with these gangs.
Right. And let's not gloss over the reason why groups like the Black Panthers had to be created.
Right.
Because these Black people were oppressed.
And they were being drafted into Vietnam, Billy.
Yeah. And for absolutely no, they had nothing to do with any of it. It was, it was a war that we shouldn't have been in.
No.
These kids didn't volunteer. They were drafted. They were sent there. They were put on the front lines, and they were killed. And
when Hampton sets the Rainbow Coalition, Billy, that to me, that's where Hoover just says, we're pulling out all the stops to stop this guy, because that was so dangerous in Hoover's mind. Because now you're forming alliances, with black nationalist groups and with Puerto Rican groups and white groups, poor white kids and the young patriots. And that, to me, Hoover, that in his eyes, now he's got an army to go after. And that's what he did. He went after them, and he systematically took apart the Panthers.
Yep.
Took apart the Panthers. There's no way, because by 1982, Bill, they were gone. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have on this, Billy. I'd like to get a guest on. There is one thing we have a book up on our bookshop, The Assassination of Fred Hampton, the updated edition by Jeffrey Haas. And it's how the FBI and the Chicago police murdered a Black Panther. That's what it's called. It's up there on our bookshop. You could get it. I had the book. I read it. It's a fantastic book. I recommend it to everybody. But just another dark chapter, Bill, in the 60s, buddy.
Yeah. And again, can't recommend that movie. Judas and the Black Messiah is the name of the movie. Can't recommend that enough.
Yeah, great movie.
Great movie.
So how are we on time here, Billy?
Good.
All right. Well, because I want to bring up do you have anything else before we conclude on Freddie Hampton, though, Bill?
No, let's we can wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I have a couple questions on Carlos Marcello, Bill. Okay. And one of them was from our buddy Giordano in Rome, Italy. And he wanted me to explain the whole Carlos Marcello threat against Kennedy. Was it real? So I did a lot of digging on this, Billy, and here's the thing. The legend, the story goes like this. In summer 63, Carlos Marcello in Louisiana was with this guy, Ed Becker, who's a private investigator. And apparently, according to Becker, Marcello goes on this tirade against Kennedy. And he says, and this is important, Bill, in the Sicilian dialect, he says something to the effect that if you cut the tail off a dog, the dog still lives. But if you cut the head off a dog, the dog will die. Meaning, if we kill Bobby Kennedy, then John Kennedy, as president, comes after us with the Marines. But if we kill John, then Bobby doesn't have the power. Right. He can't come after us. So it's a great story, Bill. It's actually become legend. I mean, people believe it. And it's been in documentaries, been repeated. It's been written in books. I mean, John Davis, his books, I'll talk about it, But the thing is, it's complete garbage, Bill. It's a complete made-up story. And the thing is, there's a guy by the name of Gino Minari. And I'm going to see if he's still around, because I don't even know if he's still alive, but I like to get him on a podcast. But he was, the last I heard from him, he was on Black Op Radio with Leno Sanic. This was a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And Gino Minari was a Italian guy who worked in the casinos in Vegas for a long time. And he became friends with a lot of the mafioso that came in there, including Carlos Marcello. They became really good friends. And he talks a lot about Marcello. And he said that, and this is what I always said, Bill, Marcello never talked to him about business, anything about business. Because why? Because he's not a made guy. He's an outsider. Even though he's Italian, he was friends with him. They talk about fishing. They talk about, fly fishing, stuff like that, but they never talk about business.
Right.
So anyway, Gino Minari, really good friends with Carlos Marcello. And at the end of Marcello's life, he had dementia. I think he had the touch of syphilis. I mean, he was really in bad shape at the end. He was hallucinating. He was saying things that make no sense. And people say that, in prison at the end, he threatened Kennedy and said something to the effect that, he killed him and stuff. You can't take anything that Carlos Marcello said at that point. The guy had dementia. He had all kind of health issues. Mm-hmm. It was so bad that they let him out of prison, Billy, to go back to his home and just spend the last couple of weeks of his life, and people could go there and pay respects.
Right.
So does Gino
call it compassionate release.
Right. So does Gino Minari goes from Vegas to Louisiana to pay respects to Carlos Marcello. And he's waiting in line there. People are going in to, to pay respects to the Godfather of New Orleans. And who's there but this guy, Ed Becker, this private investigator who Marcello supposedly said this thing to, okay, which I always found as a red flag, Billy. Because first of all, Becker's not Italian. He's obviously not a made guy. And Marcello just volunteers this information that we're going to hit Kennedy. We're going to kill the president of the United States. And he tells this outsider.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells it in the Sicilian dialect, Bill. And this guy Becker, who I don't even think could speak English pretty good, understands the Sicilian dialect and knew exactly what he was saying. But anyway, Minori recognizes him because the guys have been in documentaries and everything telling his story. And he's listening to him. And he's talking about how excited he is to finally meet Carlos Marcello. And Minori's like, my God, he supposedly met him 30 years ago when he told him when he threatened Kennedy. So he called him out and he said, listen, what are you talking about that you never met him before? What about the story you're telling everybody? You're on TV telling people that, 30 years ago that you threatened, that Marcello threatened Kennedy. And he's like, oh, I didn't really hear that. I heard it from somebody else. And he's like, who? And he just started mumbling, and then that was the end. He walked away. So for all these years, Billy, 60 years now, this has been a legend, and the whole thing was made up. And people started looking into this. Was Becker even in Louisiana at the time when he supposedly said this? And he wasn't. He was in Vegas. So he made this entire story up, Bill. And this is where it goes. The same thing with all the Marilyn Monroe crap and the Kennedys and the mob and all that other garbage, where irresponsible journalists don't check their sources. They just run with a story because it's a great story and it's going to make headlines and clicks.
Right.
So they run with the story. And Bill, friends of ours, I talked to Ange about this. Ange, mentioned this Carlos Marcello thread, Pilch. It's out there. Everybody knows about it. And the thing is, the whole story is just garbage.
Yeah.
And Marcello, Bill, the day Kennedy was killed, was in a courtroom. And he was fighting. They were trying to deport him. He was fighting to stay in the country. And he didn't have time to be planning any assassinations. He was fighting for his life. And again, as boss of New Orleans, he wouldn't have the authority to make a decision like that affects the entire structure of the mafia, because killing a president would affect the mafia at a national level. So that would have to come from the commission and the outfit in Chicago, Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam Giancana wasn't the boss, Ricardo was. So, these guys that they put these guys in the plots, Marcello and Giancana and Trafficante, and none of these guys could have okayed that. It would have to come from the commission. And now there's going to be the movie coming out with Al Pacino, that's going to push that lie about the mob rigging the election for Kennedy. There's another movie that Leonardo DiCaprio's father is pushing about Marcello, that he masterminded assassination. And like I said, Bill, this is why I try telling these people, there's nothing down that road. I was down that road. I looked into it. There's nothing there, Billy.
Yeah.
And they just want to keep pushing the agenda that the mob masterminded, the mob, and it's all hearsay. It's all sources that are unreliable. And it's I don't know if we're ever going to stop it, Billy, but again, you can't, you just show me some evidence, Billy. Show me some evidence.
Well, it's like we always say, Sean, why let the facts get in the way of a good story?
I guess, but it's frustrating, buddy. It's frustrating, and I don't know, but that's it on Marcello. The whole thing, Gino Minari, Bill, I'd love to get him on the show if he's still around. I don't know. I haven't seen him. I only saw it, last time I seen him was on Black Op Radio. I heard him on there.
Yeah.
But I know he was real close with Carlos Marcello, and that was a great interview, Bill. And he had some great stories and stuff. But again, these guys are masters of avoiding self-incrimination. They don't talk to outsiders.
Right.
So if you think Carlos Marcello is going to tell a private investigator who's not even Italian, not even in the, not in the mafia, not a made guy. He's just going to volunteer this information. We're going to kill the president of the United States. Do you really think he's that stupid, Billy?
No, I don't.
Well, and that's that, buddy. We're going to end it on that. And that's enough out of you there, Becker.
That's enough out of you. All right, Sean. Well, good job. Another good episode. I know, a lot of people have been asking for, people have been asking for this specifically, but I know a lot of people have been asking for us to do these sort of, I don't know, they call them, I guess, standalone episodes.
Standalone episodes. Yeah. They like, they like the guests that we have on, but they like also, when me and you just do an episode and,
yeah.
And like I said, Bill, everybody check that book out on Freddie Hampton. It's tremendous. And, it's on our bookshop. You could get it there. The links are all over my social media, Bill. They're easy to find, buddy. People are asking me, where to find a website. I can't make it any easier, Billy. I posted on there and I put right there, listen here. And I have two links, Bill, YouTube and Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout is all the other apps besides YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever you want to listen to your podcast. And I put the 2 links there. All you got to do is click on the one that you want to listen to and find your app, Billy.
Yeah.
Listen to us. And the link on our website has everything, Billy. You can find everything on our website. If
you got us on a podcast platform, and you're thinking, hey, I'd really like to have this show on this platform that's not on, let Sean know, let me know, and I can, it's easy enough for me to fix that. It's easy enough for me to get our show on the other platforms. I mean, we're on all the major ones. We're on Spotify, like you said, Amazon, Apple, all the major ones, and Google as well. But if there's one that you like in particular and we're not on there, just let us know and we'll get on there.
Yeah, we could add it, but we're on, I think, a total like 30 some, Billy.
We're on a lot. We're on a lot. So, all right. Well, good episode, Sean. Thank you for your tireless work and all the research that you do. I think we're providing a good service here for the people.
I think so, Billy. And the thing is, if you listen to our episodes right from the beginning, you listen to each one, they all tie in together when you think about it, Billy.
Yep.
Everything ties in. It's like one big story, Billy.
Yep, I agree.
And we got some good guests lined up, Bill, and we got some more standalone episodes coming up, Billy.
A lot of stuff coming up. A lot of stuff. So we are in the middle of a pretty good run, I think, with guests.
We got some new ones coming in 24, Bill, and we got some returning guests, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We just got we got a nice network, Billy, of authors, and one thing, Bill, I do want to mention though, we've had some that wanted to come on and we just went in the other direction on some of these, just because we're gonna go with sources, Bill, that we know that we could trust, that could be backed up with documentation, and if there's some authors that are quoting sources that we know are unreliable, we're just not going to put them on our show because we're going to give the people the truth, Bill.
Right.
Sometimes you don't want to hear the truth, but we're going to give the truth, and we're not going to put somebody on that's going to push stories about stuff that we know is not true.
Right. Yep.
And that's what we do here, Billy. We give the people the truth, and we speculate on something, we get it wrong, you can come back at us.
Yeah, but we're going to tell you we're speculating. We're not.
Yeah, we're going to tell you we're speculating, and if we're backing something up, we got documentation, and we got the authors we bring on. We trust them because we backed up. I researched this myself, and we back it up with documentation, and we know that when they're saying something, they're telling you the truth.
That's right. All right, Sean. That's enough for you.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night. That's That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.